Hi, I thought because he's been so popular in the last year on the Disney Channel that we would learn how to draw Baby Yoda, or Grogu as we've come to realize is his real name. And we won't have a discussion on whether you agree or don't agree with the name, but he's cute nonetheless. So basically this is what the final sketch will look like. And then I have some color options of what you can use to shade him in. So the easiest way to draw Grogu or Baby Yoda is to think of everything as basic lines. Usually when people draw and they're being taught to draw, one of the things that they're taught is, or at least how I was taught, was that everything is made up out of basic shapes. So if you'll notice, it might feel intimidating that you're actually drawing a face and trying to nail proportions and features. But one of the beautiful things about drawing is that oftentimes it's just simple lines and shapes. When they put together, they make something that can be complex and detailed and communicate something beyond what their initial original form was. So hopefully that makes sense. What we're going to start with though is we're going to start with his eyes. And on this piece of paper, to make sure that his ears and his head and everything else fit, that his whole body fits on this paper, you want to do his eyes somewhere around the middle, okay? And so we're also looking at approximately the size of your thumbnail. If you're older, if you're younger, you might want to draw it a little bit bigger, maybe like mummy's and daddy's size of their thumbnail. That will be the size of his eyes, and that will ensure that if you start with his eyes somewhere around this area, that the rest of him will fit on the paper. So basically, if you look at Grogu, his eyes are, what would we call that? Basically a semicircle. Okay, and instead of it being a straight cut bottom, it's a little bit of a curve. So that's a simple line. That's a simple shape that we can draw. So I'm going to start over here and I'm going to draw. There it is. There's a semicircle. And if you notice, the one side is a little bit higher or lower than the other side. And instead of drawing a straight line across, it almost looks like the dome of a snow globe. We are actually going to curve it just a bit. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. We're going to do a semicircle. And because Grogu's eyes, they're actually a little bit on an angle so that they're lower here and higher here, we're going to make sure we do the same thing on this side and join it with a curve. Now he's got big, big eyes. And I don't know if you guys have ever noticed when you're drawing something or you've seen a picture of something that sometimes the eyes look dead, and that's because they don't have highlights. Highlights are those white spots that catch in our eyes that make our eyes look alive. So anytime that you're doing a drawing and you can't figure out why it doesn't look alive or lively, or it feels like there's something missing from the picture, it could be that you don't have highlights. So his highlights are just going to be a large circle with a small circle off to the side underneath it. And the thing that helps when you draw eyes is to make sure the highlight lands in the same spot in both eyes. So we're going to draw a highlight on this side and a circle on that side. Now if you look at pictures of Grogu, Baby Yoda, you will actually see that he's got these big, beautiful, I think they're like a brownish color eye. So he's got his iris and he's got his pupil, and that's what we're drawing here. And you're basically thinking they're round like a circle, but you're not able to draw the whole circle in there. And just to show you what I mean, I'm going to shade this part of his pupil in so you can actually see the shape, because it might stand out a little bit. So it's been round, it's a round shape. It's almost as if the bottom and the top, well, the top has not been cut off, but the bottom has been cut off because it is disappeared behind his bottom eyelid. Okay, so we're just going to quickly shade this in so that it's easier sometimes to see. Normally I would recommend doing all the shading in after, in case there's a mistake made, then you can erase something. But in order for you guys to be able to see, sometimes it helps that it's been shaded in. Okay, so there's his two eyes. Now his nose is almost in line with his eyes. Sometimes, I don't know if you've ever noticed, when you draw anything that is a baby, they have big eyes and they have small features like their nose and their mouth. So his nose is a tiny, tiny, tiny little semicircle, okay? If you think of it like the letter U, the bottom part of a letter U, and then he's got his little nostrils on either side, and it's almost the exact same shape on either side. It's just a tiny little curve. And the majority of the features of his face are just little curves. They're exactly that. It would be like as if you were drawing a C, but not a full C. Then you've got his mouth, which comes down just below. And a lot of times baby Grogu, he looks very, very serious in the series. In this picture, we're going to make him smirking a little bit, okay? So he's got sort of a flat part right there for his lip. And I've left it as a flat line, but then it curves up just a tiny, tiny little bit. And that's what makes his little smirk. So you're looking at two little curves on either side. And the thing with Grogu's mouth is you don't want it to go past this part of his eye. He has a tiny little mouth most times when you see drawings of him, and you can tell that it's kind of like a baby feature. He's also got a little tiny chin. So that's his chin right underneath his mouth. And same thing, it's a lot of the same shapes that we keep drawing over and over again. If you think of a comma, or if you think of a bracket, parentheses, you know, part of a U, part of a C, those are the type of shapes we're looking at. Then he has his eyelids, and the shape of his eyelids basically follow the same shape as his eye. So now we're getting into larger U shapes or C shapes, and he's also got little tiny eyelids underneath as well. Then we have to draw his chin, and he has a little chin, but again, it's the same shape. Now, if you look at the shape of Grogu's head, it is a dome shape. It's very similar to the shape of his eye. So what I do is I draw part of it. Okay, and he's got some bumps on the top. So if you look at that, that's the bumps that go around his face. He's also got these big, cute cheeks, okay? And his cheeks start somewhere around the mid-eye, okay? He's got a little bit of a temple, and then his cheeks come in right down here. Now, this is the part where his outfit sometimes curls up and wraps around, and you sometimes see him where he's been able to hide his face into the collar of his coat. So we're going to keep his chin exposed because I think that's part of him that makes him look cute. And we're just going to draw that like that. So there's his chin. Now, here's his ears. If you look at the shape of Grogu's ears, okay, think of them basically as a teardrop, a big, giant teardrop that almost has part of it flattened. Or if you think of, I don't know if you can look at this almost looks like a whale head. Can you see that? How it looks almost like a humpback whale head. I'm trying to think of simple shapes. It could be a seed of some sort or a flower petal. His ears are quite large and they have that sort of shape. Now when he is happy, his ears are turned up just a little bit. Okay, so we're making him, remember he's smirking, so he's slightly happy. So what I'm going to do is from this part of his cheek, I am going to draw the bottom part of either what we would call our flower petal, or it could be part of your teardrop, and we're going to do the same thing on this side. And it's okay if they are not exact in the shape. Okay, it's okay to have some lumps and bumps and not have them be consistent. The top of Grogu's ears tend to be quite flat. Okay, they've got a round tip, and it's basically a little bit of a wavy line, and then it attaches. It comes up a little bit onto his head. And the same thing on the other side. Okay, so kind of a wavy line, not entirely straight. Now we have to draw that inside piece of where his ear is actually attached to his head, like that. And the same thing, and you'll notice they're not identical, and that's okay. And then we have a curvy line that almost mirrors the shape of the bottom part. There are his ears. okay? And if you look at the length of his ears, each ear is almost the same length of his head. So that tells you how far out you can go. You don't want to make his ears shorter than the length of his head or the width of his head. You want them to be at least that length, because that's what makes his ears, that gives the right proportions. Now, if you were to look at how tall he is, he's quite petite. He is a baby. And so basically, when I looked at pictures of him from the artists from Disney that had drawn him, they make him approximately 3 head widths tall. So when I drew him 3 head widths tall, I found he looked a little too tall. So I decided to go 1 head width, and I measured it down and put a line there, and a 2nd head width. So I made him, just about 3, roughly, maybe just a little bit shorter than that. And if you look at his body, you've got the collar, and the collar is basically, I guess if you were to think of it like a rectangle, that's curvy, okay? It's a very simple shape. And then if you look at his coat, it hides his toes. And so I did almost like a rectangle, but wider at the end. And then same thing, it's almost like a triangle. If you look at it this way, his sleeves are triangles, okay? So simple shapes. So let's start with his collar. So we have it bunching. It comes up around his ear, and it's quite a thick collar. And there's one side. And then it comes literally, it wraps around the back of his head and his ear, and it comes around this way, and there's the other side of his collar. For his body, like I said, it's almost like a rectangle that is more narrow at the base, because that's where his feet were. And some pictures show him with a piece of where his coat overlaps, like a trim, and other drawings show no trim. So for his sleeves, he has quite long sleeves. If you look at the proportions, his sleeves go quite long, and not his whole hand comes out beneath them. So I would say beyond the halfway point of his whole coat is where his sleeve will come down. And if you look at it, I've basically just drawn almost like a triangle there. And he's got his cuff on that side. And then we do the same thing on this side. And again, they don't have to be completely even. And then his hands are cute because he's only got the 3. He's got, I think, the thumb and the 2 fingers, right? So, and he has tiny little, kind of like a point to his fingertips. So on this one, so if you look at it, it is almost looks like the claw of a bird before you get the talons on them, or it could almost look like the foot of a frog without the webbing in between. This side we can do just the 2, his thumb and his 1 finger. And there you have the completed Grogu. The other thing that you can do is when you shade him in, so these are the basic colors of Grogu, Baby Yoda. You've got a number of shades of green, kind of from an olive green to a light and dark leaf green. And then his coat is kind of a tanny color with a little bit of brown in it. So you can go ahead and shade that in. And then actually, if you notice his eyes, the iris that we left around here is actually like this deep brown kind of color. So you can go ahead and color him in. Just make sure when you color in your baby Grogu that you shade all in one direction so it looks nice and tidy. And there he is. There's your baby Grogu. And if you have success in drawing him, or you feel like you've decided to change the style of him a little bit and draw him a slightly different way, please send these to Greg, or post them on the same page that you saw this tutorial on, because I would love to see what other people have come up with, because there's a lot of interesting different versions of Grogu, Baby Yoda, and it's kind of fun to see everybody's individual styles come out as they draw these. Hope you had fun, and I hope you are having a good day.